I'm not interested in learning a lot about the features. What I'm interested in as the end user is basically, what do I get out of it? You can just tell people, how much time do you save? What would be different if we would actually not call it AI, but for example, smart technologies, because usually with smart technologies, we don't feel threatened, but it's rather seen as a help.
I have a team of 20 assistants, and there is this sales assistant, Anna, and then there is this copywriter, John, or podcast producer, Mark, and they all have these names and how they communicate. And it completely changes the perspective.
We think it's important. We had this kickoff and we have a new strategy paper and it's in there, but how do you actually feed it in the culture of the organization, of the company? And that's much harder than just writing it down and having a mission.
Welcome to AI Made Simple, the transformation series. I'm Valeria Pilkiewicz, and I talk with global leaders, innovators, and practitioners who are shaping the future of work in the age of AI. I'm joined today by Dr. Elisa Konya-Baumbach. Elisa is a professor of consumer psychology and behavior at the Bern University of Applied Sciences, co-founder of Humest, and one of the leading researchers on the psychology of AI acceptance. She works as a consultant, coach, and speaker with a strong focus on human factors behind the adoption of smart technologies. In her research and advisory work, Elisa explores why people trust, resist, or misuse AI systems, and how organizations can design AI strategies that actually get used in practice. Hello, Elisa. Thank you for joining me on this podcast.
Thank you for inviting me.
Elisa, you research and consult on something most organizations overlook, the psychology of AI acceptance. Can you tell us what that actually means and what led you to focus on this?
Well, yeah, what does it mean? That's actually, it means what it says, meaning that, in my opinion, AI or technologies, evolving around AI, they're a little bit special in terms of getting accepted or not getting accepted. So the psychology of AI is basically concerned with all of the individual human reactions that we have that sometimes are not as rational as we would like them to be. And so I'm exploring the more irrational phenomena around the acceptance or non-acceptance of AI. And that's where the whole psychological lens comes into play.
Regarding this irrational that you mentioned, your research shows something counterintuitive. Even when AI outperforms humans, like in medical diagnostics, for example, people still resist it. So can you tell us what's actually happening psychologically when someone rejects something they know works better?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question. There can be a lot of different mechanisms at play. So the short answer is it depends. So there's not the one answer to this question, but what you just mentioned, like in medical contexts, that's pretty common that actually AI performance is much better than, by human doctors. However, here there's not only the rational decision maker at play, but much more, psychological factors that weigh in. Like in this case, this can be a sense of uniqueness neglect. That's a phenomenon that has been researched, which basically means that humans, individuals tend to think that AI cannot really grasp the whole uniqueness of their case, of their in this case the health concerns, which of course is a fallacy, right? Because if you have a well-trained AI with enough data and the right data, then of course this AI would have seen much more cases and also special cases that might be very seldom than any doctor could ever see or treat or diagnose in his or her career. But this is a phenomenon that has been seen, and this is one psychological mechanism that can be at play. But there's also a lot of other stuff going on. It's age related. It doesn't have to be it's not the main driver, but can be that people that are just used to and have been used to, have a personal relationship with their medical care provider. They just feel more comfortable. They feel more, they trust their medical care provider, like the human doctor, much more than an AI. And then there comes a lot of stuff into play in terms of transparency, like how transparent and understandable is this diagnosis or decision. And then we go into the area of explainable AI. So there are a lot of different boxes actually that I could open right now, but yeah, it really is a complex field where you cannot say like there's only one psychological mechanism at play, but it really depends. And
You distinguish between cognitive trust, which
Mhm.
is I know it works, and affective trust, which is concerned with safety or I feel safe when using this technology. And obviously, we've seen a lot in the companies when it comes to AI adoption or AI initiatives that many people close up because maybe they don't feel safe anymore or they feel like AI is going to take their jobs. And we all have seen this news titles and media titles. And from what I see, that most AI initiatives focus on technology, and everybody
Mhm.
thinks, oh, if the technology is great, we're going to create the best AI model or trade on our best data, or we're going to buy this best tool, the best licenses, right? But what actually happens in the companies when the emotional layer gets ignored?
Yeah, well, that's actually one of the biggest challenges for companies because
Hmm.
we are driven by KPIs usually. So, and
Hmm.
having this performance in mind, which kind of makes up for this cognitive trust, like we know it works and we know what it does and we can rely on it basically. Well, this is something that is yeah, more easily guaranteed, or that can be worked on very well. But this emotional layer, as you called it, or this affective side of trust, this is much less tangible, which makes it harder to measure, harder to track, harder to make evident also in organizations. But in general, as I have found in my research and also in my consultancy work, is that we as individuals, as human beings, we are always looking for some kind of connection, some kind of relation, right? And the cognitive trust is only accounting for so much. But this emotional
Hmm.
layer, the effective trust, is much more about this building this connection, bonding, right? And we are also doing this kind of with an AI counterpart. And you can actually also design AI interfaces or AI systems in a way that they promote, facilitate, enhance effective trust. But you have to you have to keep it in mind that this is actually also a design issue or an issue of how we want the AI to talk, which conversational style is actually adapted. Do we want to have an empathetic AI, like do we want to have empathetic talking or not? Do we want to convey emotions or not? To which extent? And then this actually helps people to gain this effective trust and to then also be much more open to adopting AI in the long term. So if companies actually don't have this in mind, what I see a lot is that, just maybe the technology is good, but people won't use it.
I actually want to dig deeper into this humanizing AI part. And,
Hmm.
we've been using technology and, in fact, AI for many, many years now, everyone, right? We open Netflix, it uses AI algorithms or navigation systems or translators. But once you say artificial intelligence or large language models or machine learning, that's where people, especially non-technical people, they get shut down, right?
Mm.
And a lot about framing or humanizing AI. You do also research on it, and I really like this perspective. So, can you tell us more about the research, about the findings, and if you have some practical recommendations for business leaders, for companies, how they can frame this artificial intelligence, this scary big thing, into something that people want to engage with?
Definitely, yeah. So the aspect that you just mentioned, this kind of humanizing AI, which is in scientific terms called anthropomorphization, which is kind of a tongue breaker. So this is something that we actually as humans engage in very naturally. So if we, for example, have a conversation with a generative AI like ChatGPT, we usually, of course not all of us, not in every context maybe, but usually we have the tendency to apply like social rules and norms, right? So probably everybody can relate to that, and probably everybody has said thank you to generative AI when he or she completed a task, right? So, which is of course not necessary because it's not a human, but we are looking for this social cues, which is why we naturally also anthropomorphize. So we actually are giving in our head a human image to this AI entity. And you can, of course, play with this and use this in contexts where this might be helpful to for example, gain the trust, effective trust. And you can, for example, then use human-like pictures or names, or you can, like talk, like how does the AI talk, being more emotional or more empathetic. And in some contexts, this might be very helpful. Maybe in service settings where people, are looking actually for or seeking for a human counterpart. This might be helpful. In other contexts, we don't need it as much. But so this is how you can kind of enhance this social connection and the so-called social presence that is perceived by us. And because this is a natural tendency that we actually, it's in research it's the so-called CASA paradigm, the computers as social actors. So we just perceive AI to be a social counterpart, although we know it's not a human being, right? But still we have this reciprocity in terms of social norms and interaction that we apply. Yeah, and what does this mean for companies? It really depends on which area this company is in. So there might be, if you, for example, are talking, we talked about medical before, but if you really talk about mental health, yeah, of course, here empathy and anthropomorphization is much more helpful, also to get people to heard and to share what they actually have in mind. But in organizations in general, what I have also seen, and this might also be maybe a good hint to think about, we have heard so much about AI, and AI is like everywhere, like in the press, in media. And usually the associations that people have with AI, they can be positive, but usually it's very mixed, right? Because we also hear a lot of, stuff that maybe people might be afraid of. So AI in general is a topic that is polarizing a lot. So people
Yeah.
can have very extreme reactions to it. And this is why I think it's always good for companies to kind of make themselves aware about, like, how do we actually, what's the connotation? What are the associations that we have with AI, with artificial intelligence? And then you can actually make a little exercise internally in the organization and just think about, like, what would be different if we would actually not call it AI, but, for example, smart technologies, right? Because it's basically saying the same thing, right? It's not something different, but it's totally differently connotated. So because usually with smart technologies, we don't feel threatened, we don't have, we are not afraid, but it's rather seen as a help, as a tool, which actually AI is also. But, for a lot of people, AI has so much more associated, like it has a very heavy weight attached to it, which can by itself be a barrier to adoption, right? So if we can kind of lift this weight and just make it a little bit more neutral, right? The term per se, then this might already help in organizations to kind of get it going, like to kind of get this whole adoption and usage process going. And this might be a good entry to that.
These are some great insights. In fact, I noticed even in my trainings with custom GPTs, for example, I felt like when you call it, custom GPT or Copilot agent or whatever, people are like, what's in it? But when you put it in a way that, I'm actually a solopreneur, but I have a team of 20 assistants, and there is the sales assistant Anna, and she has the image generated with the Midjourney, which looks like Anna, and then there is this copywriter John or podcast producer Mark, and they all have images, and they all have these names, and they all have a specific tone of voice and how they communicate, and it completely changes the perspective. And then everybody's like, oh cool, I also want to have a team of little helpers that's going to take over these little tasks that I have day to day. So I find it really fascinating how this framing can change the whole reaction during the training, for example, and subsequent adoption as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's also something that I saw. And just calling it, like, seeing it as a colleague and giving it names. And also, especially if you work with teams where there's a high resistance and rejection and, skepticism, this can be very helpful to kind of define a job role, and, just like a job posting. And basically, then it's much more like an assistant that helps out instead of, the AI that is taking our jobs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And what you also mentioned is that it's not just on the individual level, but also organizations have to look at the company level, how they talk about AI. Do they talk about as a transformation and something good, or as a threat? But what you also talk about is that it's not just two levels, it's actually three levels. It's also like individual, then organization, and then societal level. So maybe the country as well. Can you walk us through what influences acceptance at each level, and where maybe also organizations that are stalled, where should they go and look at? What can they influence?
Yeah, definitely. So you mentioned that these three levels, and actually, usually I like to think more about it as four levels because you're absolutely right. There's this individual level, the organizational level, and the societal level, which basically goes from small to bigger community. But I also think that the technology itself is a dimension that weighs into the acceptance because we
Mhm.
talk about AI very broadly right now, but this can also range from to like this is also very influential. And for each dimension, basically, there's a variety of influential factors that weigh in. I'm happy to give you some examples, but yeah, to go through all of them would probably take us for a very, very long time. For example, this we just talked about the connotation of how you talk about AI or what is associated with AI, with the term itself. And this is
Mhm.
actually something that is influencing AI perception, AI also acceptance on a societal level, right? So it depends like in which ecosystem are you actually embedded into. And there can be a very negative connotation of AI basically. And this is something that is, that is surrounding us and on the cultural embedding that we are in, right? So this is a factor that comes in at a society level. If we think about the organizational dimension, what can have a pretty big influence is actually seen as a strategic imperative. Do
Mhm.
companies actually see and think AI is important to implement and to use and to just incorporate into the company strategy basically or not? Of course, that's a big thing. I mean, of course, that's a very dynamic field, and nowadays we can actually almost not imagine that there are companies that don't have AI in their strategy, but there actually are a lot of them. So yeah, that's striking. And even then, like given that you have this strategic imperative and you say, okay, we AI is important for us and we want to use it, then you also actually as a company have to allocate the resources, right? So if you have a
Yeah.
strategy, you have to also, let actions follow that kind of bring the strategy to life. Otherwise it's just, on paper. And that's what I see a lot also in companies that, people say, well, we think it's important, we had this kickoff and we have a new strategy paper and it's in there, but how do you actually feed it in the culture of the organization of the company? And that's much harder than just writing it down and having a mission. So for a lot of companies that I have consulted, I actually saw that they would like people to use AI, but one of the influencing factors here, one of the barriers basically is if the workload is very high in those companies and they don't really have a strategic prioritization in terms of really financial resources and temporal resources allocated to this topic, then it won't fly, right? Because people at the beginning, if you have to learn new skills, you have to readapt, you have to unlearn habits that you
Mhm.
had before, and now you have to do it in another way, which in the end might be much more efficient. But on the way, when you're on the way on learning it, it usually takes some more time because you try and error, you go back and forth, you don't have
Yeah.
this efficiency and productivity increase right away, right? You have to work on it. You have to kind of get better at prompting. You have to get better at, you know, understanding which cases are good, where can I use it, how. So this is a learning process. And if this is not acknowledged as a learning process by the organization and the time is not allocated for that, then that might be, this usually is a big barrier in terms of organizational level. Yeah. And then on the individual level, I mean, there is really a lot of stuff going on in terms of, we're like everybody is individually very different in terms of where we socialize. What is our age and cohort? Like even gender is different, and all of this weighs into how we perceive AI. Like we have different personal tendencies. Some of us are maybe more autonomous, and they love to be autonomous. And others they love security much more and they like to have it safe and they like stuff that they know, and others are more open to innovations and they are more risk taking maybe, and I can go on much longer in terms of like personality traits and how they actually influence how we perceive AI and also how open we are to actually engage in using AI. this also, of course, goes hand in hand with skills. Like, do we have the skills to do it? Do we still have to learn it? Are we eager to learn new skills? Or are we just like, oh, no, I actually am pretty good with, I want to stick to, to what I've done like the last 10 years, right? Yeah, so that's a lot of human barriers that can factor in. Yeah, and last but not least, on the technology dimension, just in general, even here you can in a company also influence how the technology is seen, right? So if you have a certain AI agent assistant that you would like to introduce, and this basically, it's basic marketing actually, but a lot of times I see also actually for startups that are very techy, have all of this tech knowledge, but they don't have like they have their own language, and you can't, sometimes you have to translate this into just common knowledge language, meaning that I, as a user in the end, in the organization of the AI assistant or agent, I'm not interested in learning a lot about the features, about the technological like background of how does this work. I mean, maybe it's good to have an understanding of general stuff, but you don't have to be very technical about it, or go about all of the features. What I'm interested in as the end user is basically, what are the benefits from, like, what do I get out of it? What are my benefits? And you can actually, in communication, you can do this. You can talk about the benefits rather than the features. It's the same thing, but it's just phrased very differently. So in terms of, instead of, ruminating about I don't know, the technological specificities that basically make something more efficient, you can just tell people, like, how much time do you save? Basically, I don't know, I don't care how, but how it works at the end, but how much time do you save? Like, for a lot of people, this is much more effective to know that, and to get communication about, they can grasp it much better, the benefits, if they are communicated like that.
What's in it for me?
Absolutely.
How can I benefit from this training, technology rollout, and so on?
And actually, this can also have different levels, because what's in it for me, for some people, this means finding an intrinsic motivation. Like, I want to learn this because I can actually get better, get faster, I don't know, have more time for other stuff that I would love to do, right? But it can also be a motivation in terms of, well, what's in it for me? It also is maybe a skill that you will have to learn in the years to come, to just to stay competitive. And I think that's also a pretty important factor that sometimes we don't have in mind on an individual level, to stay competitive, because it's not AI taking your job, but maybe it's a colleague, or another applicant that is using AI more effectively than you, who is taking your job, right? So it's kind of a skill that is, that you at some point might be necessary to have in certain jobs. I mean, if you want to stay competitive as an organization, I think it's my opinion that you don't have a choice whether or not to use AI, but rather you should think about, how can I do it? Like, how does it benefit my company?
Yeah, or it comes back again to the mindset, right? It's not like we still wait and decide how others do it, right? Or no, we don't want to do it, but rather, okay, it's there, like we have to do it, it's not going anywhere. So how do we approach it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, I want to reiterate on the points that you mentioned. So you've emphasized that AI acceptance is deeply individual, and each of us is different. Each of us has different fears or motivations. Each of us has different, as you mentioned, it starts with demographics and psychographics and so on. What I often see in companies when I'm doing AI literacy trainings is that often, because of budget constraints or other constraints, it's often one size fits all. It's like, okay, there is this series of workshops, 2-3 workshops that we sort of have to cover for the compliance to make sure we are AI literate. And then we do it the same workshop, same use cases for everyone. And maybe you have a practical tip. What should organizations actually consider when designing AI literacy programs, AI trainings? So how do you move from this one size fits all approach into something that actually increases the adoption after this training?
Yeah, that's a very good question, actually, and a lot of like a question that not a lot of organizations actually have in mind. And I think that's actually crucial to think about, like, where can we get everybody where he or she stands right now, right? And I know that's also very complex, but actually also AI is helping us here to be more personalized, right? So what I would advise such companies to do is, I mean, of course, you can do this one size fits all approach. It's better than having no, upskilling, at all. But if you want to have it more sophisticated or more tailored to the specific levels and needs of employees, what you could do is to kind of have an assessment, which doesn't have to be a very big thing, but just like a self-assessment, like a questionnaire online before you engage in the training that might help you to better evaluate, like, which, first of all, is this employee, like, is he or she resistant or skeptic towards AI or not? And then also, how much is he or she involved with using AI regarding the specific job requirements? So there might also be a difference, right? And also maybe how much is he or she interested in learning more about how does it work actually? And all of this could factor into, just having a calibration of who runs through which program, or who can get like I would actually think about it like a modular approach, having different modules that you can kind of mix and match to make a more suitable package for each and everyone.
I love the idea of using technology. There are many modern learning management systems, right? That like Sana, I have in mind that allow you to tailor this kind of experiences to make them individual. But then also what I have seen working well, not just having this, okay, one AI literacy training, it could be good that it's somewhere there, but also more engaging people, right? Making the challenge or the hackathon, and then doing maybe some on-site workshops for functional teams, like one day for marketing, one day for sales, and then doing maybe another champions enablement. So just not, okay, we've done sort of AI literacy, that's it. Right, this the same workshops for everybody, every employee has to attend, but rather, okay, how do we live it, right? On a day to day, what else can we do? But with all of it, as you were saying, you need to actually plan for it, both resources, time, and budget and people.
Absolutely.
Elisa, after studying all the ways humans resist AI, what gives you optimism about where this is heading?
Well, I know, I think, I know my research is a lot focused on the barriers, but rather to just better understand the barriers and then to kind of get solutions to overcome the barriers. What gives me optimism is that we as human beings usually are pretty good in adapting to changing environments, to transform. But some of us, of course, it takes a little bit more time for some of us and a little bit less time for others. But I think, just to stay curious and stay open to new technologies, because AI is not the last thing that will happen to us. There have been a lot of technological innovations that have basically had this radical nature, and just to keep in mind that it's not, it's always also an opportunity to develop oneself and to grow and to be better. I think that's my optimism, where my optimism comes from.
Wonderful. So growth mindset. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, and also future skills in terms of uncertainty. Just embracing. Not embracing uncertainty, but just being able to cope with it, because we don't know how everything will evolve and how, like, it's just uncertain times, uncertain environments. So, and being flexible and making the best out of that, I think that will help a lot. Yeah.
Do you have anything else that you would want to mention from maybe what we haven't covered yet?
Well, maybe just the one takeaway, if someone hears that and just thinks, well, what is my takeaway now? I think the most important thing for me is to convey is that for organizations, but also for individuals, just take in mind that you should think human-centric. The human is always the most important thing. And even if you have the best AI, it doesn't help a lot if it's not used by humans. So there's a great quote actually that I would like to quote at this point. It's from Sherwin Kodabande from Boston Consulting Group. And what he said is, the single most critical driver of value from AI is not algorithms nor technology, it is the human in the equation. And I think that's basically the most important takeaway from my side.
A great quote to end this episode. Thank you so much, Elisa. Where can people find you if they want to reach out to you?
They can find me on LinkedIn always. Then they can also find me, in my academic sphere right now at the Bern University of Applied Sciences. I have a page there. I also have my page from Humest, the consultancy, which is also evolving around the human factor in smart technology adoption. So there are a lot of channels to reach out, and I think LinkedIn is the safest one. Like, I will definitely see that.
Great. I will put all the links in the show notes. Thank you so much again. It has been very, very interesting, very educational as well.